Commissioner McLeod puts the finishing touch on the rebuild of Conference USA by flying over the Ozarks and adding Missouri State. Missouri State was founded in 1905. It was renamed from Southwest Missouri State in 2005 after 20 years of trying to get their name changed, with the first attempt coming in 1985. Springfield is the number 73 media market, and Missouri State has a 25,935 enrollment. There is room for Missouri State to fill a void. As of 19 states, with a population of over 6 million, New Jersey and Missouri were the only two with only one FBS team. And looking at football recruiting using the 24/7 database and looking at the number of 3 or 4 or 5-star recruits each state produced between the 2 years of 2022 and 2023, only New Jersey and Missouri were the only 2 states in the top 25 states for football recruiting that had only one FBS team. And with Missouri now acquiring a second FBS team, that makes New Jersey, Maryland, and Missouri the only 3 states in the top 20 states for football recruiting with less than 3 FBS teams. In the age of enrollment cliffs and many schools with declining or stagnant enrollment, Missouri State has been experiencing an enrollment boom. This graph shows Missouri State's enrollment from 1906 to 2023. As you can see, in 1960, at about 2,700 enrollment, Missouri State was about 1/10 the size of today. And if you look at the mid-90s, Missouri State had an enrollment of about 17,000, whereas today it's nearly 26,000. So in the last 30 years, it's grown by over 40%. Missouri State's enrollment boom is supplemented by the Springfield metropolitan area's population boom. These graphs from the Springfield Regional Economic Partnership show the Springfield MSA's population trend over the decades. And the Springfield MSA has gone from 264,000 in 1990 to 492,000 today, nearly doubling in those 33 years. This graph shows the population growth per decade, and the Springfield metropolitan area grew by 19% in the 60s, 24% in the 70s, 15% in the 80s, 23% in the 90s, and 18.5% in the 2000s. Then you break it down further and look at the annual population growth, and Springfield has an annual population growth of 1.6%. That is nearly triple the state of Missouri's annual population growth of 0.6%. And it's quite a bit ahead of the United States annual population growth of 1.0%. Not to mention the 10-county region has an annual population growth of 2.2%. Looking at the enrollments across Conference USA, FIU has a monster enrollment of 56,000. Kennesaw State has a monster enrollment of 45,000. But third in enrollment is actually Missouri State at over 25,000. Using the Department of Education's Equity and Athletics EADA database and looking at the athletic revenue and athletic expenses numbers, Missouri State's athletic revenues of $22.7 million would rank 224th nationally. It would rank 10th in Conference USA. Their expenses were the same at $22.7 million. And the fourth column is how much of each school's expenses are devoted to athletically related student aid money. And then the bottom column is how much of their athletic expenses are left over after you isolate that student aid money. And you can see it has an effect on Delaware, where they were second in athletic expenses, but they had a very high $15.6 million in student aid money. So once you isolated that, their leftover athletic expenses went to third in Conference USA instead of second. Now this slide looks at the athletic revenues across 3 different databases. The first is the EADA database. That's the least accurate of the 3, but it's the only one that gives us both publics and privates. The other 2 databases are Sportico, which only tracks FBS publics, and the Knight Commission, which only tracks publics. You can see Middle Tennessee's athletic revenues jump from $35.6 million to $40.9 million. UTEP's jumps from $30.7 million to $40.7 million. And Western Kentucky's jumps from $25.4 million to $40.4 million. Missouri State sees a similar jump as their athletic revenue is $31.1 million per the Knight Commission, which I believe is the more accurate database. Now we look at football expenses. The top two rows are from the EADA database. Missouri State has $5.1 million in football expenses, which would rank 134th in FBS, but that's to be expected as they've been playing FCS. The bottom row is Sportico, which only has the schools who've been playing FBS football in our publics. Now we look at men's basketball expenses, and Missouri State's $3.2 million would rank 4th in Conference USA and 160th nationally. When we use Sportico, which is in the bottom row, UTEP's men's basketball expenses jumped from $4 million to $4.7 million. Here we look at the 10-year Sagarin ranking in football across Conference USA, and then the 10-year KenPom ranking in men's basketball. Western Kentucky had the highest 10-year Sagarin at 74th, followed by Liberty at 80th. Of course, we're only counting Liberty's FBS years. Louisiana Tech was 3rd and 92nd. And Jacksonville State was 82 in Sagarin this season, but it's only a one-year sample size. Now at the bottom, I've taken the schools who've played little to no FBS football: Jacksonville State, Sam Houston, Kennesaw State, Delaware, and Missouri State, and looked at their Sagarin ranking over the past 5 years with a 5-year average at the bottom, and then parentheses is their record. It's no surprise that Sam Houston did very well with a 5-year average of 129.6, which is including both FBS and FCS schools. And Jacksonville State also did very well with a 5-year average of 136.8. What might surprise some people is Missouri State had a 5-year average of 145.8, which was nearly 10 spots ahead of Kennesaw and Delaware, who both had the same exact average of 155.0. There's a perception of Missouri State being a punching bag in football, and they've only had one winning record in the last 5 years. But the computers say that their record is a function of playing in the SEC of FCS football, which is the MVFC. Looking at 2023, for example, Missouri State went 4-7 and Delaware went 9-4, yet Missouri State was 10 spots ahead of Delaware in Sagarin. Similar story in 2022, Missouri State was 5-6, Delaware was 8-5, yet Missouri State was 10 spots ahead in Sagarin. And back in 2020, Missouri State was 5-5, Delaware was 7-1, yet they were basically the same in Sagarin. So the computers suggest that Missouri State is better than you think, and we'll see how that bears out as they transition to Conference USA. Taking a peek at the 10-year KenPom in men's basketball, Louisiana Tech was 1st at 99th, New Mexico State was 2nd at 104th, Western Kentucky was 3rd at 113th, and Missouri State was 4th in Conference USA at 131st. And that's despite Missouri State being down for the past 13 years. And it goes to show how playing in a really difficult league was kind of taking the oxygen away from Missouri State, as the MVC was 9th this year, and it's usually 10th or 11th. Sometimes it'll have a down year into the teens. But Missouri State, their 131st 10-year KenPom would rank in the back half of the MVC, but it would be 4th in Conference USA, which is still a pretty good mid-major league, with schools who've had success in the NCAA tournament like Liberty, UTEP, New Mexico State, Middle Tennessee, Western Kentucky. And by joining an easier but still really good mid-major league, Missouri State basketball will have more room to breathe. Bears football plays in Plaster Stadium, which opened in 1941. It was built as a WPA project for $60,000. It was renovated for $21.8 million in 2014. It has a 40-seat luxury box plus 24 suites of 10 each, and it has a 17,500 capacity. Bears basketball plays in Great Southern Bank Arena, which opened in 2008. It was originally named JQH Arena after John Q. Hammonds, who donated $30 million. It was constructed for a $67 million construction cost. It has 22 suites and a 10,542 capacity, and this arena is one of the top mid-major arenas anywhere throughout the country. In addition to top-notch basketball facilities, the Bears men's basketball history runs deep. In 1987, they had a 7,100 attendance, which ranked 63rd nationally. They won the AMQ8 and beat Clemson in the NCAA tournament. Fast forward 3 years, and Spoon Hour still had the Bears rolling, as they averaged 8,200 attendance for 60th nationally and earned an at-large bid to the NCAA tournament as a 9 seed. By the end of the decade, Steve Alford was at the helm, and the Bears earned an at-large bid to the NCAA tournament. They averaged 7,600 attendance, which ranked 65th nationally, and held Wisconsin to 32 points in the NCAA tournament and blasted Tennessee by 30 en route to the Sweet 16. In the mid-2000s, Barry Hinson had them very high in RPI. In 2006, the Bears averaged nearly 7,000 attendance, which ranked 77th nationally. The MVC that year had 4 bids and was the number 6 conference in RPI, and the Bears would have the highest RPI or net snubbed from the NCAA tournament since the tournament expanded to 64 teams, as they had an RPI of 21. And a bit of a backstory on that 2006 snub. The final at-large went to Air Force, and comparing Missouri State and Air Force, Missouri State was 20-8 with a 12-6 record in the number 6 conference, while Air Force went 22-6 with a 12-4 record in the number 8 conference. Missouri State had a 21 RPI with a 46 strength of schedule, while AFA had a 50 RPI with a 158 strength of schedule. Missouri State beat 5 NCAA tournament teams, while AFA beat 1 NCAA tournament team. Missouri State went 5-8 versus the RPI top 50, with those 13 top 50 games broken down as 7 road, 1 neutral, and 5 at home. So when you consider the home-road split, 5-8 was their expected record, while AFA went 0-1 versus the RPI top 50, and they had 0 top 75 road neutral wins. Missouri State's 4 best wins were at 25, and then at home against 29, 33, and 39, while AFA's top 4 wins were at home against 56 and 67, and then 78 on a neutral court and at 92. Missouri State did not lose a single game outside the RPI top 45. Could you imagine a BCS or a Power 5 team ever being left out of the NCAA tournament while not losing a single game against a team outside the top 45 in RPI or net? That's completely unthinkable. Meanwhile, AFA had 3 losses to teams between 120 and 170 in RPI. In my view, the committee selecting AFA over Missouri State is straight up the worst selection ever made by a committee in NCAA tournament history. It was awful, awful. I have 2 theories on what may have happened. The first is less likely, but it has to do with the final at-large playing their first round game out in San Diego. And perhaps they wanted to put a West team out there in order to better sell tickets. My second theory, which I think is much more likely, comes down to social politics. If you look at the bid distribution that year, the ACC, Big 12, Missouri Valley, and Pac-10 all tied with 4 bids. And in order to give Missouri State an at-large, that would mean giving the Missouri Valley a 5th bid, which it completely deserved. And given the selection committee typically consists of 50% Power 5/Big East representatives, I don't think the ACC rep or Big 12 rep or Pac-10 rep, assuming they were on the committee that year, which they usually are, were going to let that fly. And then to put icing on the cake, the Mount West was the number 8 conference in RPI that year, and it would have been a 1-bid league if AFA was not given an at-large. Regardless, no one will ever convince me that AFA was selected over Missouri State for a basketball reason or a resume reason. Bears fans were robbed. Barry Hinson was robbed. Barry's Brigade, which was one of the best student sections in the country that year, was robbed. The Sugar Bears were robbed, point blank in the period. And if that wasn't bad enough, the following year in 2007, Missouri State had a 36 RPI, which is in the range of an at-large selection. They went 3-5 against the top 50, and they beat number 6 Wisconsin, who was 29-5, and gave Wisconsin their lone out-of-conference loss. The MVC was once again the number 6 conference in RPI, but only got 2 bids, and Missouri State was snubbed again. The fans came out in full force, averaging 7,100 attendance for 77th nationally. Missouri State should have been back-to-back NCAA tournament teams in 2006 and 2007. Barry Hinson should have been a 2-time NCAA tournament coach. The following year, or after the following year in 2008, the Bears would move out of the Hammond Student Center and move into one of the Taj Mahals of mid-major arenas, JQH Arena, now Great Southern Bank Arena. And a few years after that, under Conzo Martin, the Bears would win the Missouri Valley in 2011. They averaged 7,500 attendance that year for 69th nationally. And in the regular season finale on ESPN, they had a sellout of 11,077 as the Bears beat the Wheat Shockers 69-64 in a winner-take-all game for the Missouri Valley title. Now, Missouri State doesn't draw like they used to. The last 13 years of mostly down seasons have taken a toll. For example, I attended Arch Madness this year, and I would rank Missouri State's fan turnout probably 9th, maybe 8th out of all the teams in the league. But before the last 13 years, Missouri State had a long, demonstrated history of generational, strong fan support in men's basketball. And so while the fan base might be kind of dormant right now, the coach they just hired, Conzo Martin, was the last guy to sell out what was then JQH Arena back in 2011. So if he can build the program up like he did back then, a lot of those fans might come back. The Lady Bears have a very storied program with historically a very strong fan following. Jackie Stiles was the all-time NCAA scoring leader for something like 17 years until about 7 years ago. And the Lady Bears have made 17 NCAA tournaments, 5 Sweet 16s, and 2 Final Fours in 92 and 01. Bears baseball is also a very storied program. They play at Hammonds Field, which was built in 2004. Thanks again to John Q. Hammonds. It has an 8,000 seating capacity, and the Bears went to the 2003 College World Series. And you can't discuss Missouri State without mentioning the Sugar Bears. The Sugar Bears originated in 1976 and were named one of the 25 best college dance teams in America in 2022. Attending Arch Madness, one thing I picked up on quickly was the Sugar Bears were a fan favorite across all the fan bases. Missouri State would join the MIAA in 1912. Their original name was 4th District Normal School, and in 1919 they would rename themselves from 4th District Normal School to Southwest Missouri State. Southwest Missouri State would remain in the MIAA for about 70 years, so 3 generations, and the school would move up to Division I in the early 80s. They would join the AMQ8, and the AMQ8 would become the Mid-Continent Conference, and the Bears would join the Missouri Valley Conference in 1990. Southwest Missouri State would try to get its name changed to Missouri State from 20 years starting in 1985 until 2005. And if I recall correctly, they were only able to pull that off because the governor was a Missouri State alum. The Bears would have a 35-year reign in the Missouri Valley before they joined Conference USA in 2025. Here are some photos I took of JQH Arena, now Great Southern Bank Arena, when I went 5 years ago in 2019. Here's a Jackie Stiles statue. They have a bear statue out in front. There's the mascot. There's a life-size bear inside. And one thing that was super cool about this arena was all the historical stuff inside. It had a bunch of old trophies, a bunch of old jerseys, old apparel. And if you go to a Missouri State game, it's worth getting there when the gates open, just so you can check out all the history on the concourse. It's basically an athletics museum for Missouri State. And here are a bunch of photos I took from different vantage points in the game I attended at Missouri State. That's it. Some people have been asking about an MVC expansion video. I didn't have time to put that together today because I had to focus on Missouri State. But give me about 48 hours and I'll have that up on Monday.